Hey everyone, Robert here, author of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life. Are you ready to start living life to the fullest? Are you ready and willing to transform yourself and your life from ordinary to extraordinary? Well then, let's get to it. Welcome, my friends, to the Fully Engaged Life. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Over the past several years, I've received and continue to receive comments and questions regarding competitive sports and the ego. They're generally in response to a couple of blog post articles that I've written and posted on my website at www.expansionmastery.com. A couple of these articles deal with the explanation of the relationship between competition of any kind whatsoever and spirituality, and the basic fact that there is no relationship between them. In fact, they're kind of at opposite ends of the experience spectrum. Now, I fully realize that what I'm about to share here may be a bitter pill to swallow, considering the addiction many have to competitive sports today. But I encourage you to step outside of your conditioning for just long enough to hear me out and consider the truth of what you're about to hear. What I'm going to share here with you is not a judgment on my behalf, nor is it my opinion. It is a fact brought forth from the wisdom attained from decades of spiritual practice. So please allow me to address this issue once again, and hopefully once and for all. Now, I don't have anything against sports. I have no interest in competition, but I don't have anything against sports. It's not of interest to me at all, but I understand they can be fun. However, the first thing to understand and question is this: when and why did you first come to enjoy competitive sports? The mistake most people make due to being of ordinary, unawakened mind is that they have been purposefully steered towards liking sports from a very early age. They believe that they made the conscious choice to like sports. But most often, this is not true. Most often, at a very young age, children are being indoctrinated into sports by their parents. Much the same way they're indoctrinated into a very particular religion from their parents. And of course, this is all well-meaning, but that still doesn't make it beneficial. Liking sports is a form of social indoctrination. It's part of the grand illusion. Competitive sports have become ingrained in most cultures as a way to distract the masses and generate extra revenue. In most cases, you were indoctrinated into sports by a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a counselor, a teacher, so on and so forth. But haven't you ever wondered why young children are pushed so heavily towards sports in grade school, and why it seems to be the primary focus of high schools and colleges? Right? Those games are televised. People bet on them. Why? Have you ever wondered why schools kept competitive sports while disbanding important curriculums of real-life skills such as woodshop, auto mechanics, home economics, and other particular academic courses? Sure, some of it has to do with the money, but that's not the only reason, or even the primary reason for that matter. Have you ever stopped to question, even for a moment, why it's become so accepted that parents run around feverishly every day, every weekend, taking their kids to various sporting events, on top of having an already busy work schedule of 1 or 2 or even 3 jobs? The point is that very few people decide for themselves that they like competitive sports. It's what they did to appease a parent or to just fit in. Sometimes it's just because they don't have anything else to do. They don't have any direction in life. They don't even know what they like. In the vast majority of cases, it was a completely mindless submission into this form of mass distraction. Today, in most cultures, sports have become like a religion to the people. And this is a very dangerous thing. Just look at how dangerous organized religions have become. Competitive sports have turned out to be a way to make millions of dollars, to be considered as a celebrity, to be on TV, to have the spotlight on you, to have people cheering your name. You see where I'm going with all of this? All these things satisfy the ego. Of course, the ego convinces you that you're doing it for a more noble cause. You have a noble, just reason. Because you have a love for the game. Yeah, the ego's good like that. It'll find justification for just about anything you really, really want to believe. But that doesn't make it true. Competitive sports is about the money. It's greed. And it's a distraction-based form of entertainment. That's it. Ask those multi-millionaire players if they'd play the game if they were only making about $50,000 a year. And you'll see just how much they truly do love the game. If you need proof of the distractive nature of competitive sports, look no further than the silly fantasy leagues that have sprung up. It was decided that it wasn't enough to watch the games, go to the games, buy the paraphernalia, play sports video games nonstop, and waste valuable brain power on memorizing all of the players' names and stats. That's crazy. But that wasn't proving to be enough of a distraction for the masses. So along comes the invention of the Fantasy Football League, and right on its heels, the Fantasy Baseball League. I'd have to be honest with you here because nothing makes me laugh harder than to be present when grown men and women are sitting around getting all worked up about players they're picking for their fantasy team and how much money they're betting on this. The foolishness of it just strikes a tone with me that makes me laugh. I can't help it. It is so absurd. And it's a make-believe game. This exposes the childish nature of it because the ego is like a spoiled child. And this is why we have what is affectionately, I'm going to say affectionately, being called as grown-ass man-children, right? This is what we have in our society today. What we need to understand is that competition of any kind whatsoever breeds ego. Now, for the record, please allow me to repeat that once again. Competition of any kind whatsoever breeds ego. There's simply no way around it. I've stated this time and time again, but because the ego has become so attached to the satisfaction it derives from the distraction of sports, people continue to question me about this, trying to find new ways to rationalize that they are so special and already so enlightened that they are capable of participating in competitive sports without having the ego flare, without stroking the ego. I don't think so. It doesn't work that way. Competition of any kind whatsoever breeds the ego. Even if you're claiming to focus only upon the personal aspect of it, the unconscious mind is still keeping score. It's still doing its best to win. The ego itself is always competing. You may not realize it because it's taking place in the unconscious mind, but I assure you, it's happening. It is the mind, specifically the ego, that creates a sense of separation, of us and them, you and me. This illusion of separation, It's all directed by the mind, primarily the ego. And nothing reinforces this faulty mental construct more powerfully than competitive sports and religion. And I'd throw politics in there as well. This sense of separation between two teams, the fans of both teams, that sort of thing, right? Where you have two teams and they're going at each other, and you have the fans of those two teams and they're screaming, at each other. This is the model of an egoic viewpoint. This is the ego in action. And I often get this question, but don't competitive sports bring people together? How is that not a good thing? Sure. Yeah, they bring people together. And why do these things seem so wonderful to you? Because all of you, all the players, the fans, the managers, everybody involved are living in an ego-dominated mind. That's why you think it's a great thing that it brings all these people together. But you're bringing all the people together to actually go against one another. You're not there as a whole. There is a sense of separation. This is what you are missing. This is what you're failing to understand. All of those people are addicted to the rush of the drama of whether or not you and your team will win or lose. How deep does this addiction go? Just listen to anyone speak about the teams that they follow. They almost always state how they won or they lost. Yet they didn't do anything. They weren't on the field. They weren't part of the team. They were sitting in a chair screaming at the television. Yet the ego has pulled them in so deeply into this drama that they personally identify with it. It's not by accident that they say that. Look at how often riots start after the game because of the egos of the fans, because their team lost and they are incapable of coping with the reality of not winning. They throw a childish hissy fit and destroy property and harm others. Is that a wonderful way to come together? Can you not see the ego in that behavior? Just like a spoiled child throwing a fit that didn't get its way, so too do many sports fans behave. I've also had comments and questions left on my website where people would claim that they've already become enlightened, in most cases in just a few short months. And they still play competitive sports, without the focus being on the competitive nature of the game, of course. While I cannot substantiate nor deny their claims to being enlightened in just a few months, I can say this. Anyone who has attained any degree of awakening never really speaks about, I attained enlightenment, or I had these enlightenment experiences. Most of the time, anybody who's actually had an authentic experience doesn't even use the word enlightenment. Just throwing that out there for you. And this can be validated by the fact that there's still an addiction to playing competitive sports there. These addictions are mental constructs. They deal with the ego. It shows that there is not a sense of awakening that has taken place. Not to mention, being unable to give up sports just because you've done it all your life reveals the clinging nature of your mind. This is attachment, and it arises from ego, not enlightenment. Have we forgotten the fact that there are sports-based activities, ways to get out, get some exercise, get some fresh air, have some fun, spend some time with friends, right? There are ways to do that that don't include competing against one another. If the competitive aspect of sports isn't important, then why do we seek a sport activity instead of something that doesn't include competition? Can't you have the exhilarating experience of being in the zone while doing something like mountain biking, hiking, swimming, kayaking in the ocean, or other such demanding activities? Well, most people can't, and it's because these things don't stroke their ego. See? Does the ego have to play a role in competitive sports? Yes, it does. Sports is not life, and life is not like a sport. Life doesn't have to include any type of sports in order to experience things like being in the zone. Take, for instance, an example of my beautiful bride. A couple months ago, she came home from work very excited to share with me how she nailed a particular presentation that she gave at the hospital. Her words were, "I was in the zone and it went perfectly." She was so happy. The presentation was something she gave. There was no competitive aspect to it whatsoever. I myself experience being in the zone all the time. I'm always in the zone when I practice my swordsmanship or martial arts. And in swordsmanship, when we're engaged in the act of tameshigiri, my wife and I will be out there, and you get to experience a zone. Tameshigiri is where you have the rolled wet or dry bamboo on the stand, and you get the live blade katana and you cut it. And it has to be a beautiful cut and just right. And there's so many times you can just nail it. You're in the zone when your sword's going through that tatami. There's no competitive nature to it. It's not about competing with anyone or anything. It's about becoming one with the sword and the cut itself. I feel in the zone all the time when I'm teaching my students various forms of martial arts. And these are non-competitive, non-sport martial arts. Real martial arts at their source were not meant to be a competitive sport in the first place. My point here is that if you believe that you need sports in order to enjoy one of those moments where you feel in the zone, then what you're doing is simply trying to convince yourself that there's a more noble reason that you're involved in it, and it's not about the ego, when indeed it's the ego that's feeding you that line of crap in the first place. If you had truly attained some degree of awakening, then you would have gone through the practices of developing mindfulness. Do you understand? Being in the zone comes from mindfulness. It's when you're in the moment, you're totally focused, everything is there, you got 100% physical, mental, all your awareness is there in the moment, and everything unifies together. Okay? Mindfulness is teaching you how to live that way at all times. Doesn't require sport. It requires authentic mind practices. The funny thing here is that if you are not engaged in any mental or spiritual practices and you're playing sports, you might have one of those moments where you're in the zone every now and then, right? It's hit and miss. Even for the professionals, it's hit and miss. Maybe they have it for most of a game. Maybe they just have it for one play, whatever it is, right? It's very hit and miss. Why? Because it's basically an accident. All of the things, your mind, your body, everything unifies in that moment, but you don't know how you did it. You're not consciously doing it. It's an accident. See? In order to get to where you can attain that state of mindfulness all the time, where you're living in the zone where everything matters, it takes these practices. You can't get there from playing sports. You can only get there through authentic, specific mindfulness practices. And the thing that gets me is that after you go through those practices, to have that, you have no interest in playing sports anymore. Once you get it, you don't even want to do that, right? Because you're living that way. And then these things that are just distractions just fall away. You don't have any use for them anymore. So sometimes people will cling to sports so strongly that they rationalize this form of justification for desiring to participate in competition. But the idea is we're supposed to be living in that state of mind all the time. This is part of the focus of our spiritual practices. This is what it means to live a fully engaged life, right? The fully engaged life is about living with that sort of awareness. You're in the zone just all the time with everything you do. And I can tell you, it's incredible. It is incredible. Now, I'm not going to lay claim to being there 100% of the time, but I live there a lot, and that is the honest truth. You can too, but you're not going to get there through playing competitive sports. I can guarantee that. It comes down to a matter of personal priorities. When we engage a spiritual path, not some new age fluffy thing, but an authentic spiritual path, developing mindfulness. And I'm referring to authentic practices of very specific mindfulness here, not whatever made up association you might choose to place on it as far as what mindfulness refers to. Real mindfulness means that you're living in the zone with everything you do. Mindfulness is attaining a mental state where you're just living in the zone. Now, I know I'm being a little rough here, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there aren't beneficial aspects to sports or that sports aren't fun to play. Of course they're fun to play. That's why everybody gets easily hooked on them. Hey, they're fun to root on. I don't enjoy it personally, but people around me seem to. But let's face it, most people draw upon those things only when they're confronted with the need to justify their ego-feeding addiction to competition. Let's look at something here. Let's look at the sporting event like the Olympics. This event brings people from all over the world together. And that's a beautiful thing, right? It's wonderful. It truly is. But don't you think for a moment that we could create something far more meaningful, something far more mature for a reason to come together? Consider this. Would you be interested in going to another country and uniting with others from all different cultures if competition wasn't involved? If you didn't have a team to root for? I guarantee the tickets would be far cheaper. The hotels would be easily available, and the attendance would be embarrassingly low. It's all about the money. It's all about the distraction. And as I say that, I realize that most people never even stop to ask themselves what they're being distracted from. Yeah, think about that for a moment. What is it that you are being distracted from? Could it be by design, by an agenda, that it is preferred that we are distracted sitting in front of that television, which now looks back at you every minute that you look at it and more? Could it be that they want to keep us distracted from all the corrupt political and governmental goings on? Could it be that they want to keep us distracted and away from participating in things that truly matter, like meditation, meditative practices, and the development of mindfulness? Nah, couldn't be. Couldn't be that. There's one thing that I've found myself through my own experiences, my own practices, my own lifetime, as well as witnessing it in others who have decided to live a spiritual life as well. When you are living a spiritually based, spiritually charged life, going through the awakening process, you have no interest in competition or competitive sports. After decades of performing practices to overcome the ego-dominated mind and glimpse upon truth, you tend to find competition a bit distasteful. The ordinary mind, dominated by ego, greatly enjoys competitive sports. The conscious mind, free of ego, really has no use for it at all. It really doesn't matter how many ways your ego manifests, dreams up, creates to help you justify why you want so badly to keep participating in whatever degree in these competitive sports. But the fact remains, it is still an attachment, it is a form of the mind clinging, and it is derived from the ego, not your essence. Now, I'm not saying through all of this that you can't go out once in a while to a game and enjoy it and have some fun. Okay? But you have to understand that if you're sitting in the stands screaming and rooting for a team, or even just the act of observing two teams competing for one another. You have already been emotionally pulled in to that situation, and your mind has already been impacted. Your ego has been activated. You can't help it. You need to be aware of it. And if you yourself are down there on the field, you're in it even more deeply. There's no way around it, people. I know you don't want to hear this, but the truth is there, right? Reminds me of this cartoon that I always see circulating on Facebook and things like Instagram and stuff, right? Where it shows two booths, and one booth has a long line of people and the other booth has nobody in front of it whatsoever, and the guy's kind of got his head down on his fist, looking bored and tired, and the sign in front of the booth with no line in front of it says unpleasant truths. And the sign in front of the booth with the long line in front of it says comfortable lies. See, it is our own mind, our own ego that perpetuates these comfortable lies in order to create the comfort zone. It helps us believe whatever we truly want to believe. We can make up some ridiculous crap. I mean, some far-fetched stuff. And we have the ability for our mind to actually make us believe it's true. And it's really funny because human beings are the only species on this planet capable of doing such a thing. Amazing, isn't it? We have to come to grips with the unpleasant truths and accept that they are indeed truths. We have to stop falling for the comfortable lies that we tell ourselves, that others tell us, that we are supposed to believe. We need to see for ourselves, to experience for ourselves the truth. Whether that's unpleasant or pleasant to you, truth is simply truth. And the truth is, any form of competition triggers the ego. When the ego has been triggered, this takes you into the mind in form of separation that is the opposite of the essence, opposite of pure conscious awareness. That, my friends, is an unpleasant truth, but a truth nonetheless. It's really interesting to me how I expose things about politics, religion, and yet the thing most people cling to more than politics and religion is sports. Consider that for a moment. Ponder that. And after you do so, make sure and visit us at www.expansionmastery.com. You can go there and you can get your signed copy of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life for only $5. That's right. Go to the website. All the details are there, and you can order it up. Just put in the special discount code that is listed there on the website, and you're good to go. I also appreciate any time that you share these podcasts. Please get the truth out there of spirituality. Please help me perpetuate some real, authentic spirituality so that we can raise our vibration, we can engage in this consciousness shift, and we can move the evolution of our species in the right direction. So you can do that on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. So make sure and visit, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things that you do all the time. Do a little this way and help support us. And I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I'd love to give a shout out to all of you guys in all these different countries. Germany and Japan, you guys are really coming through. The big numbers with you guys. And as always, a lot of love going out to everybody here in my state of California. You guys are awesome. You continue to support me so well, and I appreciate it. Just continue to help me out by spreading these podcasts and sharing my book with people you care about. For $5, you can stock up. You can buy as many as you want right now. You can stock up and you can give them away to people who are meaningful in your life so that they have a way to engage some authentic practices. If you want to really make somebody happy, the Appreciation Mastery Program is available on my website. That is surefire way to happiness. It is an incredible program, so easy, so outstanding. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Until next time, my friends, I wish you the very best in your practices and in your life. Take care.